Hi everyone, Brian here wishing you a great Friday and a wonderful weekend ahead. This past Tuesday evening, a number of COSers joined other members of the Diocesan Peace and Justice Commission at a garden party up at St. John's Old Irving Park here in the city. We gathered there to recognize the work that Father Anthony Vaccaro has done on that diocesan commission ever since he's been ordained to the priesthood. He's been particularly focused on the conflict that occurs in the Holy Land between Palestinians and the State of Israel, being very aware of the pain and history and hope for reconciliation across the board. But his representation on that commission has both impacted his own life well beyond that one particular place of conflict and put him in that overall and overarching reality that creating a place in this world for peace and justice to spring forth more abundantly is very core to his ministry and of course to the ministry of the whole Church. I'm aware, and have been for some time, that my point of view and the emphasis of my ministry begins way back at the seed within each of us that hopefully leads to that outpouring of peace and justice. Many of you will have heard me quote over and over again the paragraph from Ken Wilber's book, Grit and Grace, or is it Grace and Grit? Sorry, Ken, if I've titled your book. It begins with this basic understanding that spirit exists, or for those of us in the monotheistic West, God is. And then it moves from that through the human experience of connection to that spirit within, in my language, through our own soul space, and how we exercise our understanding of the soul within each of us and let it expand and interact with our everyday voice to a point where we merge in our real lives what Jesus lived in the theological reflection we have about him, that he was fully cognitively aware of the world around him and his own place in that world and his own physicality in that world and his own membership in the Jewish race under the thumb of the Roman Empire in that world and everything that it means to be part of that everyday voice that goes on within us. But that he was equally aware at exactly the same time of the heavenly truth, the great understanding of God's Spirit at work in the world, that what God's grace looked like, and the intentional energy that flows through the whole universe of God's divine spark and creativity. Jesus lived his life in constant cognitive awareness of both of these. And we can do the same. And that the outpouring of that, the eventual result of all of that is, as Ken Wilber would say, a ever-growing compassion for all sentient beings. In other words, to live into peace and justice. And our own, I see that again, especially in our own baptismal our baptismal covenant, as we find it in the Book of Common Prayer, which again begins with the reality of God, experiences how God interacts with us, how we then embrace this and live it as a community. And then the covenant, baptismal covenant ends with an ever-increasing understanding of our compassion for others and our standing in solidarity with those who are seeking deeper justice and on our part and our participation in justice for those around the world. That's the rhythm that's very close to my heart and the way I approach it. At the same time, I'm aware that people enter into that flow from all different starting points, including the starting point of peace and justice. That people wake up in the front part of their brain to the need for deeper justice, and that becomes a very attractive and intriguing place, and they look for that in the church. This can be difficult at times that we're living through right now, when there are two great issues confronting the nation. The first is the ongoing reality of gun violence and the ever-increasing number of guns, proficiency of guns, and the violent capacity of guns that are just prolific throughout every level of our culture and society. And we don't have to look at the occasional mass shootings, which alas are not that occasional, to be concerned about this, especially when we live in a place like Chicago and we recognize that gun violence has become the solution to even simple conflicts in many, many situations. The challenge, of course, is how do we confront this as a society? We can confront it as individuals, make choices for ourselves and our households. Certainly, we would never expect anybody to carry a weapon into church, and so we can have a corporate understanding of that. In these, households in our church community that we have control and influence over. But the real problem lies with our national orientation, the bequest of how the Supreme Court has understood the Second Amendment, the incredible pressure from so many Americans who believe that limited government means as much freedom that can be understood from the guarantees of the Constitution as possible, that creates a terrible division in our nation. And that's where the solution needs to occur. The other great issue is the one that's sitting before the Supreme Court right now, which has to do with reproductive rights and how the nation is going to framework a world in which, following the sexual revolution of the 1960s in particular, and the introduction of safer and easier family planning methods, that women for decades now, along with men, have pursued a sexual life that is not constrained by the traditional values, perhaps that church and state used to have. This has meant that from time to time, women have confronted the reality that they're pregnant in a situation that is really devastating for them and perhaps even more devastating for an unborn child, and need to make the, admittedly, from the Christian point of view, tragic decision, challenging and hard decision to end the pregnancy. That's another issue that's certainly before the nation. Not everyone is an Episcopalian that believes that the grace of God is there not to overwhelm us with very definitive and narrow rules, but to create an adult human being who is sober and careful and can embrace the various trajectories of difficult life. So we know that peace and justice, as we look outward at the issues, can be very fraught with political challenges, personal differences of opinion, different ways of reading Scripture, different hopes from the church. But I hope that with Anthony's departing, that the gap at COS will not be lost. And I'm very grateful that we do now have a social justice committee, and I hope parishioners will speak to especially our senior warden, Alice Kovacic, for whom this committee is very important and close to her heart. And to me or to Deacon Jess, and let us know your interests and concerns, because we'd like to make sure that this becomes a central and important part. And for those for whom peace and justice is their entranceway into the church, an open door. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you on Sunday or have you see us through our videos, and have a blessed weekend.